The lights of Gateway Prime shone bright against the darkness of space. The massive station floated in orbit around Mars, a symbol of everything humanity had achieved in the last 10 years. Inside the main conference hall, 300 people sat waiting for the announcement that would change space travel forever. Reporters from Earth, Mars colonies, and even the moon settlements had gathered for this moment. At the center of the stage stood Richard Stone, the man who had made it all possible. Richard was 52 years old but looked younger. His dark hair had only a few gray streaks. He wore an expensive suit that fit him perfectly. His company, Stone Industries, had funded most of humanity's expansion into the solar system. Without his money and vision, humans would still be struggling to maintain a single colony on Mars. Now they had 6 thriving cities on the Red Planet and were planning missions to Jupiter's moons. He smiled at the crowd and began his speech. The new faster-than-light drive was ready. Real testing had proven it could work. Humanity would soon reach the stars beyond their solar system. The audience erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. People stood and cheered. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. Richard raised his hand to continue speaking. Then he stopped. His smile faded. His hand went to his chest. He tried to take a step forward but stumbled instead. The applause died as people realized something was wrong. Richard's face went pale. Sweat formed on his forehead. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His legs gave way beneath him and he collapsed onto the stage. The crowd gasped. Security personnel rushed forward. Someone screamed for a doctor. Within seconds, medical staff arrived with emergency equipment. They surrounded Richard's fallen body. The conference was forgotten. The great announcement meant nothing now. All that mattered was the man lying unconscious on the stage. Katie Brooks stood near the back of the medical bay, watching the chaos unfold. She had been assigned to monitor the conference in case anyone needed medical attention. She never expected it would be Richard Stone himself. Katie was 26 years old and had arrived at Gateway Prime only 3 weeks ago. Everything here still felt overwhelming and strange. The medical bay of Gateway Prime was unlike anything Katie had seen before. Back on Earth, she had worked in a small hospital in Montana. They had basic equipment, old machines that broke down regularly, and doctors who relied on experience and intuition. Here, everything was different. The walls glowed with soft blue light from Valorian technology. Strange devices hummed with power from Krell science. Equipment from 3 different alien species filled the room, each piece more advanced than anything humans had invented. Dr. Helen Porter took charge immediately. She was the chief medical officer, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had trained with the Valorians themselves, learning their medical techniques. Everyone respected her knowledge and skill. She began calling out orders to the assembled medical team. 25 doctors responded to her commands. They were the best physicians in the solar system. Some had studied Krell cellular reconstruction. Others specialized in Valorian neural medicine. A few had worked with the newly contacted Xinthian species, learning their unique approaches to healing. Each doctor had spent years mastering alien medical science. They represented the pinnacle of human medical achievement. They placed Richard on the main diagnostic table. Valorian scanners activated, sending invisible waves through his body. Krell biomonitors attached to his skin, their crystalline surfaces glowing green. Xanthian metabolic sensors floated above him, analyzing his cellular activity. Data streamed across dozens of screens. Numbers and graphs showed information about every system in Richard's body. Dr. Porter studied the readings carefully. Her face showed concern. The initial scans revealed something wrong, but nothing specific. Richard's cells were breaking down faster than normal. His neural activity was erratic. His metabolism was fluctuating wildly. None of it made sense based on what the scanners showed. Katie moved closer, trying to stay out of the way while still observing. She had been assigned to assist with basic tasks like monitoring vital signs and administering prescribed treatments. Her role was simple compared to the complex work the doctors performed. She felt small and insignificant among all these brilliant minds and advanced machines. The doctors began treatment. They used a Valorian neural stabilizer first. The device was designed to calm erratic brain activity and restore normal function. Richard's body jerked slightly as the machine activated. The doctors watched the monitors expectantly. Instead of improving, Richard's condition worsened. His breathing became more labored. His heart rate increased dangerously. Dr. Porter frowned but remained calm. She ordered the next treatment. A Krell regeneration pod was brought forward. The device looked like a clear cylinder filled with glowing blue fluid. It had saved countless lives since humanity acquired the technology. The Krell could regenerate damaged tissue at an incredible rate. Their pods could heal injuries that would be fatal using human medicine alone. They placed Richard inside the pod. The blue fluid surrounded him. The machine hummed with power. Everyone waited for the regeneration process to begin. Katie watched the vital signs monitor from her position. Something felt wrong to her, but she could not explain what. She had no training in alien technology. She barely understood how the equipment worked. Yet her instincts told her something was not right. The regeneration pod ran its cycle. When they removed Richard, his condition had not improved. In fact, he looked worse. His skin had taken on a gray pallor. His breathing was shallow and rapid. The cellular breakdown had accelerated instead of stopping. Dr. Porter's concern deepened into worry. More doctors joined the effort. They consulted their databases, searching through medical records from 3 different alien species. They compared Richard's symptoms to thousands of known conditions. They ran additional scans using even more advanced equipment. The data kept coming, but none of it provided answers. Katie continued her assigned tasks. She adjusted Richard's oxygen flow when ordered. She recorded vital signs every 5 minutes. She prepared medications that the doctors prescribed. But mostly she watched. She watched Richard's face, his breathing, the small movements of his body. She watched in a way that felt different from how the doctors observed their screens and data. Hours passed. The medical team tried treatment after treatment. Synthian metabolic enhancers were applied. Advanced human medications were administered. Combinations of alien and human techniques were attempted. Nothing worked. Every intervention seemed to make Richard worse instead of better. The brilliant doctors with all their training and advanced equipment were failing. Richard Stone, one of the most important people in human history, was dying and no one could stop it. Katie felt helpless. She was just a nurse from Montana. She had no right to question the doctors or their methods. But deep inside, something kept nagging at her. Something about the way Richard responded to the treatments, something the machines were not showing, something that only human eyes might see. The medical bay had become a war zone of activity. Doctors moved from station to station, checking readings and adjusting equipment. Nurses hurried to fetch supplies and medications. The air hummed with the sound of alien technology working at full capacity. Everyone focused on saving Richard Stone, but he continued to decline despite their best efforts. Dr. Helen Porter stood at the central control panel, reviewing data from all the monitoring systems. She had been a doctor for 30 years and had never encountered anything like this. The readings made no sense. According to the Valorian scanners, Richard's neural pathways were fragmenting. According to the Krell biomonitors, his cells were attempting to regenerate but in wrong patterns. According to the Synthian sensors, his metabolism was trying to crystallize like their species did naturally. She called for another consultation. The senior doctors gathered around her, each offering their expertise. Dr. Greg Hamilton specialized in Valorian medicine. He suggested increasing the neural stabilization field. Dr. Lisa Chen had trained in Krell techniques. She recommended a different regeneration sequence. Dr. Paul Martinez knew Synthian healing methods. He proposed adjusting the metabolic enhancers to a higher frequency. They implemented all 3 suggestions simultaneously. The machines responded, their displays showing increased activity. Power levels rose across all systems. The alien technology pushed harder, working to save Richard's life. For a moment, everyone held their breath, hoping this combination would finally work. Richard's body convulsed violently. Alarms blared from multiple monitors. His vital signs plummeted. Dr. Porter immediately ordered all treatment stopped. The machines powered down. Richard's convulsions ceased, but his condition was now critical. They were running out of time and options. Katie watched from her station near the wall. She had been monitoring Richard's basic vital signs while the doctors focused on the advanced systems. Her equipment was simple, old-fashioned even. A heart rate monitor, blood pressure cuff, oxygen saturation meter, tools that any hospital on Earth would have. Nothing fancy or alien about them. She noticed something strange in the pattern of Richard's distress. When the alien machines operated at full power, his suffering increased. When they powered down, even briefly, he seemed to stabilize slightly. It was not much, barely noticeable, but it was there. Katie looked at the timestamps on her simple monitors and compared them to when the doctors ran their treatments. The pattern was clear to her. Every time they tried to help Richard using alien technology, he got worse. Every time there was a pause in treatment, he improved slightly. Katie knew she should say something, but doubt held her back. Who was she to question these brilliant doctors? They had studied for years with alien teachers. They understood technology she could barely comprehend. She was just a nurse from a rural hospital. Dr. Porter ordered another round of scans. The Valorian neural scanner activated first. It sent waves through Richard's brain, mapping every pathway and connection. Katie watched Richard's face. His eyes moved rapidly beneath closed lids. His jaw clenched. His hands twitched. He was in distress. The Krell bioscanner went next. It analyzed his cellular structure down to the molecular level. Richard's breathing became more labored. His heart rate spiked. Katie checked her simple monitors and noted the exact timing. The Xinthian metabolic sensor completed its scan. It measured energy flows through Richard's body using principles that human science barely understood. Richard's entire body tensed. Sweat broke out across his forehead despite the climate-controlled environment. Katie made her decision. She approached Dr. Porter quietly, not wanting to interrupt the intense focus around the diagnostic table. She waited for a moment when the doctor was between tasks. When Dr. Porter turned, Katie spoke softly but clearly. She explained what she had observed. She showed the timestamps from her monitors. She pointed out the correlation between alien technology activation and Richard's increased distress. She suggested hesitantly that perhaps the problem was not a disease or injury but a reaction to the treatment itself. Dr. Porter listened, but her expression showed skepticism. She thanked Katie for the observation but explained why it was unlikely. The Valorian scanners would detect any electromagnetic sensitivity. The Krell biomonitors would identify environmental factors affecting cellular function. The Xinthian sensors would recognize metabolic interference. All the data showed no such reactions. Katie nodded and returned to her station. She felt foolish for speaking up. Of course the doctors knew better. Of course the advanced alien technology would detect any problems. She was letting her limited experience cloud her judgment. She should trust the experts and their machines. But her eyes kept returning to Richard. She watched him the way she had watched patients back in Montana. Not looking at numbers on screens but at the person himself. She saw the small signs of suffering when machines activated. She saw the slight relief when they went silent. The pattern remained clear to her even if the technology could not detect it. More hours passed. Richard's condition became desperate. His organs were beginning to fail. The cellular breakdown had spread throughout his body. The doctors estimated he had perhaps 2 hours left to live. Maybe less. They had tried everything they knew. They had consulted databases from 3 alien civilizations. They had used the most advanced medical technology in human space. Nothing worked. In fact, everything made it worse. The better their treatments, the faster Richard declined. Dr. Porter finally admitted what everyone was thinking. They were losing him. Despite all their knowledge, despite all their technology, despite the combined wisdom of multiple species, they could not save one human man. The team began discussing experimental options. There was a new treatment being developed on Earth, still in early testing. They could try to rush it here, but the chances were slim. Some doctors suggested contacting the Valorians directly for advice. Others wanted to bring in specialists from the other alien species. Everyone was grasping for solutions that did not exist. Katie stood at her station watching Richard struggle for each breath. She thought about her old hospital in Montana. They had so little compared to this place. Ancient equipment, limited supplies, no alien technology at all. Yet she had seen doctors there save lives through careful observation and simple treatments. They trusted their training and their instincts. They watched their patients, really watched them instead of watching screens. She thought about Mr. Henderson, an elderly farmer who had come in with mysterious symptoms. The young doctors had wanted to run extensive tests and try aggressive treatments. Old Dr. Williams had simply sat with the patient, observed him carefully, and asked questions. He realized the problem was a simple medication interaction. Stop one pill and Mr. Henderson was fine within hours. Sometimes the answer was not more intervention but less. Katie looked at Richard again. She looked at all the alien machines surrounding him. She looked at the doctors frantically searching for solutions in their databases, and she realized something that terrified her. She thought she knew what was wrong. She thought she knew how to save him. But doing what she believed needed to be done would go against every doctor's orders. It would contradict all the advanced technology. It could end her career. More importantly, if she was wrong, Richard would die. His death would be her fault. But if she did nothing, he would die anyway. The doctors had admitted they were out of options. Richard had less than 2 hours left. Katie stood at a crossroads knowing she had to choose. Trust the experts and watch Richard die, or trust her instincts and risk everything on a simple observation that no advanced scanner could confirm. The machines hummed around her. The doctors debated treatment options. Richard's breathing grew weaker, and Katie Brooks, a young nurse from Montana who had been at Gateway Prime for only 3 weeks, made the biggest decision of her life. She would act. She would trust what she saw with her own eyes. She would remember that sometimes being human, with human instincts and human observation, was enough. Katie waited for her moment. The senior doctors had gathered in the corner of the medical bay for an emergency consultation. They huddled around a data tablet, reviewing information from the alien medical databases one more time. Their voices were low and urgent. Everyone could feel the pressure of the situation. Richard Stone was dying, and the best medical minds in the solar system could not stop it. The junior staff remained at their stations, monitoring equipment and maintaining the current treatment protocols. Katie was supposed to be doing the same thing. Instead, she moved quietly toward Richard's diagnostic table. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her hands trembled slightly. She had never disobeyed a direct order before. She had never gone against established medical procedures, but she had also never been more certain that she was right. She started with the Valorian neural monitor. It was attached to Richard's head with thin metallic strips that glowed with soft blue light. The device was supposed to stabilize his brain activity, but Katie believed it was doing the opposite. She reached for the control panel beside it. The interface was written in both human and Valorian symbols. She had learned basic operation during her training, but had never actually disconnected one before. Her finger hovered over the power button. This was it. Once she did this, there was no going back. She would be finished at Gateway Prime. They might revoke her nursing license. She might never work in medicine again. But Richard would die for certain if she did nothing. She pressed the button. The blue lights faded. The Valorian neural monitor powered down with a soft hum. Katie immediately turned to her simple monitoring equipment. Richard's heart rate, which had been erratic and dangerously high, began to slow. Not dramatically, not obviously, but it was dropping toward a more normal range. She watched the numbers change on her old-fashioned monitor and felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. Dr. Greg Hamilton noticed the change in readings on his screen. He looked up from where he stood with the other junior doctors. His eyes went to the Valorian neural monitor and saw it was offline. Then his eyes found Katie standing beside it. His face showed confusion and then alarm. He took a step toward her, his mouth opening to call out to Dr. Porter. Katie met his gaze directly. She did not speak, but her eyes pleaded with him. Just wait, just give me 1 minute. Let me show you. Greg Hamilton was young for a doctor, only 32, and had not lost the ability to question established procedures. Something in Katie's expression made him pause. He did not call out. He did not stop her. He just watched. Katie moved to the next piece of equipment. The Krell cellular regenerator was a complex device that wrapped around Richard's torso. It glowed with green crystalline light and pulsed rhythmically as it attempted to repair his damaged cells. Katie found its control panel and studied it quickly. The Krell technology was harder to understand than the Valorian equipment. The symbols were less familiar. But every machine had a power source, and every power source had a way to disconnect it. She found the right control and deactivated the regenerator. The green lights faded. The pulsing stopped. The device went silent. Katie turned back to her monitors. Richard's breathing, which had been rapid and shallow, began to deepen slightly. His oxygen saturation, which had been dropping steadily, leveled off and started to rise. Small changes, barely noticeable, but they were there. More doctors were noticing now. A nurse across the room saw the darkened equipment and started toward Katie. Dr. Hamilton raised his hand, stopping her. He was watching Richard's vital signs on his own screen. He was seeing what Katie saw. The patient was stabilizing. Not recovering, not out of danger, but the rapid decline had stopped. Katie knew she had seconds before Dr. Porter noticed. She moved quickly to the third type of alien technology. The Xinthian metabolic enhancer floated above Richard on an anti-gravity field. It looked like a cluster of crystals that rotated slowly, casting rainbow patterns across his body. It was beautiful and sophisticated and completely wrong for human biology. This one was the hardest to shut down. The Xinthian technology operated on principles that human science barely understood. The control panel showed information in symbols that Katie had only seen briefly in training. She knew she needed to lower it first, bring it down from its floating position, before she could deactivate it. Her hands moved over the controls, trying different combinations. The senior doctors finished their consultation. Dr. Porter turned back toward Richard's table. She saw Katie standing there, saw the darkened equipment, saw the Xinthian enhancer descending from its position. Her face went from confused to shocked to furious in an instant. She started across the medical bay at a near run, calling out sharply for Katie to step away from the patient immediately. Katie found the right control. The Xinthian enhancer settled onto its storage platform. She pressed what she hoped was the deactivation sequence. The crystals stopped rotating. Their glow faded. The device went silent. Katie stepped back from the table just as Dr. Porter reached her. The chief medical officer's face was red with anger. She demanded to know what Katie thought she was doing. She began listing the violations Katie had committed: unauthorized modification of treatment protocols, deactivation of life-saving equipment, endangering a patient. Each offense was serious enough to end Katie's career. Together they could result in criminal charges, but then Dr. Porter's voice trailed off. She was looking past Katie at the monitoring equipment. The numbers were changing. Richard's vital signs were improving. Not rapidly, not miraculously, but steadily and clearly. His heart rate had dropped to near normal. His breathing was deeper and more regular. His oxygen saturation was rising. The cellular breakdown that had been accelerating had stopped. The medical bay went silent. Every doctor, every nurse, every technician stared at the monitors in disbelief. For 6 hours they had watched Richard decline despite their best efforts. They had thrown everything they had at saving him. Advanced alien technology, brilliant medical minds, techniques learned from multiple species. Nothing had worked. Nothing had even slowed his deterioration. Now, with all the alien equipment deactivated, Richard was stabilizing. He was still critical. He was still in danger, but he was not dying anymore. The impossible was happening right before their eyes. A young nurse with 3 weeks of experience had done what 25 expert doctors could not. Dr. Porter stared at the monitors for a long moment. Then she looked at Katie. The anger had drained from her face, replaced by something else. Confusion maybe, or wonder, or the uncomfortable realization that everything she thought she knew might be wrong. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could she say? The evidence was right there on the screens. Dr. Greg Hamilton stepped forward. He had been watching Katie work, had seen her method. He spoke quietly, addressing Dr. Porter, but loud enough for others to hear. He suggested they continue monitoring Richard without the alien technology. Just basic human medical support. Oxygen, fluids, vital sign monitoring. See if the improvement continued. Dr. Porter nodded slowly. She turned to Katie and asked her to explain. Not as an accusation now, but as a genuine question. What had Katie seen that they had missed? What had made her think the alien technology was the problem rather than the solution? Katie took a breath and began to explain. She described the pattern she had noticed. How Richard's distress increased when the machines operated and decreased when they were silent. She explained that she had watched him as a person, not as a collection of data points. She had trusted her human observation over advanced sensors because sometimes the simplest answer was the right answer. She continued, her voice growing more confident. The alien technology was not failing, she said. It was succeeding. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do. But it was designed for alien biology. The Valorian neural monitor was trying to stabilize a brain with redundant neural pathways, which humans did not have. The Krell regenerator was attempting cellular fragmentation and reconstruction, which human cells could not handle. The Xinthian metabolic enhancer was trying to crystallize his metabolism, which was completely incompatible with human biology. Each piece of equipment was brilliant. Each one worked perfectly for its intended species. But when used together on a human, they created a cascade effect. Richard's body was being pulled in 3 different directions at once. His cells were trying to become Valorian, Krell, and Xinthian simultaneously. The equipment was not killing him through failure. It was killing him through success. The medical bay remained silent as Katie finished speaking. Doctors looked at each other, then at the alien technology surrounding them, then at Richard lying on the table breathing more easily than he had in hours. The truth of Katie's words was undeniable. They had been so focused on using their advanced tools that they forgot to ask whether those tools were appropriate. They had become dependent on technology they did not fully understand. Dr. Porter walked to Richard's side. She checked his pulse manually, placing her fingers on his wrist. An old-fashioned technique she had not used in years. His heartbeat was strong and steady. She nodded slowly as if confirming something to herself. Then she turned back to Katie and did something unexpected. She apologized. She admitted that Katie had been right and... Richard Stone opened his eyes for the first time in 8 hours. The medical bay lights were dimmed now, creating a softer atmosphere than the harsh brightness from before. He blinked slowly, trying to remember where he was and what had happened. The last clear memory he had was standing on stage, about to announce the new drive technology. Then everything had gone wrong. Katie was the first to notice he was awake. She had been sitting nearby, monitoring his vital signs the old-fashioned way, taking his pulse every 15 minutes, watching his breathing, checking his color, simple things that required no machines. When his eyes opened, she immediately stood and moved closer, speaking softly to avoid startling him. She told him to stay calm and rest. She explained he was in the medical bay and that he had collapsed during his speech. She did not tell him how close to death he had come or how unusual his treatment had been. That could wait. For now, he just needed to know he was safe and recovering. Dr. Porter arrived within moments. She had been in her office reviewing data from Richard's case, but had asked to be notified the instant he regained consciousness. She approached the diagnostic table with a mixture of professional concern and personal relief. Richard Stone was not just any patient. His importance to humanity's space program made his survival critical, beyond just medical considerations. She performed a basic neurological examination. She asked Richard to follow her finger with his eyes. She tested his grip strength in both hands. She had him answer simple questions to assess his cognitive function. Everything checked out normally. Whatever damage the alien technology had almost caused, disconnecting it in time had prevented permanent harm. Richard's voice was weak, but clear when he spoke. He wanted to know what happened. Why had he collapsed? What was wrong with him? Dr. Porter hesitated before answering. How could she explain that the medical establishment had almost killed him by using technology they thought they understood? How could she admit that their most advanced equipment had been the problem? She chose honesty. She explained everything as simply as she could. His collapse had been sudden and mysterious. The medical team had used every resource available to try to save him. They had applied alien medical technology that had saved countless lives before. But in his case, that technology had made everything worse. It took a young nurse with sharp eyes and courage to realize the equipment itself was causing his decline. Richard turned his head slightly to look at Katie. She stood a few feet away, trying to stay out of the way now that the senior staff had taken over. He asked her name and she told him. He thanked her quietly but with genuine emotion. She had saved his life when no one else could. That was not something easily forgotten or dismissed. The news of Richard's recovery spread quickly through Gateway Prime. Within hours, everyone on the station knew what had happened. The story varied depending on who told it, but the basic facts remained the same. Richard Stone had nearly died. 25 doctors using advanced alien technology had failed to save him. A young nurse using human observation and basic medicine had succeeded. The implications were staggering. Gateway Prime was humanity's showcase of technological achievement. It represented everything humans had accomplished by learning from alien species. The station operated using Valorian power systems. It maintained life support with Krell atmospheric processors. It navigated using Xinthian computational methods. Alien technology was woven into every system, every function, every aspect of daily life. If that technology could fail so catastrophically in medicine, what about other areas? Were the power systems really safe for human use? Were the atmospheric processors designed for human biology or alien needs? Had humanity rushed to adopt alien science without fully understanding it? The questions were uncomfortable and urgent. Command staff called an emergency meeting. Station Commander Jack Wilson wanted answers. He assembled a team of engineers, scientists, and medical personnel to review all alien technology currently in use on Gateway Prime. He wanted to know if other systems posed similar risks. He wanted protocols established for testing and verification. Most importantly, he wanted to ensure nothing like Richard's case could happen again. Dr. Porter volunteered to head the medical review. She felt personally responsible for what had happened. She had been so confident in the alien technology, so certain of her training and expertise. That overconfidence had nearly cost a man his life. She was determined to learn from the mistake and prevent future incidents. Katie found herself suddenly thrust into a spotlight she never wanted. Reporters requested interviews. Medical journals wanted to publish her account. Other staff members looked at her differently now, with a mixture of respect and curiosity. She had been invisible before, just another junior nurse doing her assigned tasks. Now everyone knew her name. She hated the attention. She had not acted to become famous or important. She had simply done what felt right in the moment. She had trusted her training and her instincts. That was all. She tried to return to her normal duties but found it difficult with everyone, watching and discussing her actions. Richard remained in the medical bay for observation. Dr. Porter insisted on monitoring him for at least 72 hours using only human medical technology. No alien equipment would touch him until they fully understood what had gone wrong. He was stable but still weak. His body needed time to recover from the ordeal it had endured. He asked to speak with Katie again on his second day of recovery. She came to his bedside, uncomfortable with the personal attention from someone so important. Richard was sitting up now, looking much better than he had. Color had returned to his face. His eyes were clear and alert. He looked like himself again. He thanked her again, more formally this time. He told her she had done something remarkable. Not just saving his life, though that was important enough. She had reminded everyone that human knowledge and human instincts still mattered. In the rush to embrace alien technology, humanity had started to forget its own strengths. Katie had shown them that being human was not a limitation to overcome, but a perspective to value. Katie did not know how to respond to such praise. She mumbled something about just doing her job. Richard smiled at her modesty but pressed his point. What she had done required more than just medical knowledge. It required courage to go against authority. It required wisdom to trust observation over data. It required humility to remember that advanced technology was not always better technology. He made her a promise. When he recovered fully, he would use his influence to address this issue. Humanity needed to maintain its own medical practices even while learning from alien species. They needed to value human observation and intuition alongside technological advancement. He would make sure that happened. He owed Katie that much and more. The investigation into Richard's case continued. Medical teams reviewed every decision, every treatment, every scan. They analyzed the data from all three types of alien equipment. What they discovered was both enlightening and disturbing. The equipment had worked exactly as designed. The problem was that it had been designed for fundamentally different biology. The Valorians had evolved with redundant neural systems. Their brains operated on principles that were alien to human neurology. The neural stabilizer was trying to create pathways that human brains could not support. The Krell regenerated through controlled cellular fragmentation. Their healing process involved breaking down damaged cells and rebuilding them. Human cells could not fragment and rebuild in the same way. The Xinthians had crystalline metabolic processes. Their bodies operated on completely different biochemical principles than carbon-based human biology. Each piece of equipment was brilliant for its intended species. But when used on a human, especially when all three types were used simultaneously, they created a cascade failure. Richard's body had been receiving contradictory instructions from three different technological systems. His cells were trying to become three different types of alien biology at once. The result was catastrophic system failure. Dr. Porter compiled a comprehensive report on the incident. She did not hide the mistakes or minimize the severity of what had happened. She was honest about the overconfidence of the medical staff and the near-fatal consequences. She gave full credit to Katie for recognizing the problem and having the courage to act. She concluded her report with recommendations. All medical facilities should maintain both alien and human equipment. Treatment should default to human-based medicine unless alien intervention was specifically indicated and carefully controlled. Most importantly, medical personnel should be trained in basic observation and diagnostic techniques, not just in operating advanced equipment. The report sent shockwaves through the medical community on Earth and in space. Other facilities began reviewing their own protocols. Cases were discovered where alien technology had caused problems, though none as severe as Richard's. The medical establishment was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had become so dependent on alien science that they had neglected their own. Katie continued her duties on Gateway Prime, though her role had changed. She was no longer just a junior nurse. She had become a symbol of something important: human wisdom, human observation, human instincts, in a universe full of advanced alien species. The conference room on Gateway Prime was filled with medical professionals from across the solar system. They had gathered for an emergency summit to discuss the incident with Richard Stone and its implications for medical practice everywhere. Representatives from Mars colonies, moon settlements, and Earth facilities sat around the large table. On the screens, doctors from orbital stations and deep space installations joined remotely. Dr. Porter stood at the front of the room presenting her findings. Behind her, displays showed detailed analysis of what had happened in that medical bay. Charts tracked Richard's decline and sudden stabilization. Graphs compared his vital signs under alien technology versus human care. Medical scans revealed the cellular damage that had been occurring and how it stopped once the alien equipment was removed. The audience listened in silence. Many of these doctors had trained in alien medicine. They had spent years learning Valorian neural techniques or Krell regeneration methods. They had built their careers on mastering advanced technology from species far more scientifically developed than humanity. Now they were being told that technology nearly killed someone. Dr. Porter did not sugarcoat the truth. She explained how the medical team, herself included, had been so focused on using their advanced tools that they missed obvious signs. They had trusted the alien scanners completely, never questioning whether those scanners were designed to detect problems in human biology. They had assumed that more advanced meant better. That assumption had almost been fatal. Katie sat near the back of the room trying to be invisible. She had not wanted to attend this summit, but Dr. Porter insisted. The doctors needed to hear from her directly. They needed to understand how she had recognized what they missed. Katie felt uncomfortable being the center of attention, especially among so many accomplished professionals. When Dr. Porter finished her presentation, she called Katie to the front. Katie reluctantly stood and walked to the podium. She faced the room full of doctors, scientists, and medical experts. These were people with decades of experience and advanced degrees. What could she possibly tell them that they did not already know? She started simply. She described working at the rural hospital in Montana. They had limited equipment and resources. Doctors there could not rely on advanced technology because they did not have it. Instead, they relied on careful observation. They watched patients closely. They noticed small changes in breathing, color, movement. They trusted their senses and their training. When Katie came to Gateway Prime, everything was different. The technology was overwhelming. Machines did things she could barely understand. Data streamed constantly from dozens of sources. It would have been easy to just trust the equipment and ignore her own observations. But she had kept watching Richard the old-fashioned way, and what she saw did not match what the machines reported. A doctor from Mars colony raised his hand. He asked Katie how she knew to trust her observations over the alien scanners. Those scanners could detect things human senses never could. They analyzed data at levels impossible for biological observation. Why should anyone trust basic human perception over advanced alien technology? Katie thought about the question carefully. She explained that she did not distrust the scanners. She believed they worked perfectly. The problem was that they were measuring the wrong things. They were designed to detect problems in alien biology. When used on a human, they reported data that was accurate but not relevant. The scanners were not wrong. They were just answering questions that did not apply to human patients. Another doctor asked why the medical team had not noticed this themselves. They were trained professionals with extensive experience. Surely someone should have recognized the problem before a junior nurse with 3 weeks of station experience. Dr. Porter answered this question herself. She explained that overconfidence had blinded them. They had assumed their training with alien teachers made them experts. They had believed that understanding how to operate the equipment meant understanding what it did. They had stopped questioning because they thought they knew all the answers. Katie had no such illusions. She knew she did not understand the alien technology, so she fell back on what she did understand, which was basic human medicine and careful observation. The discussion continued for hours. Doctors debated protocols and procedures. They argued about the role of alien technology in human medicine. Some wanted to abandon it completely. Others insisted it still had value if used carefully. The debate grew heated at times but remained professional. Eventually, a consensus began to form. Alien technology was not inherently dangerous. It was incredibly valuable and had saved many lives, but it needed to be used appropriately. That meant understanding its limitations as well as its capabilities. It meant maintaining human medical skills alongside alien techniques. Most importantly, it meant remembering that observation and intuition still mattered. A formal set of guidelines was drafted over the next 2 days. Medical facilities would be required to maintain both alien and human diagnostic equipment. Treatment protocols would default to human-based medicine unless there was specific reason to use alien technology. When alien equipment was used, it would be carefully monitored with human observation as a check against unexpected effects. Training programs would be revised. Medical students would learn traditional diagnostic techniques before being introduced to alien technology. They would practice observation and physical examination skills. They would study human biology in depth before learning about alien physiology. The goal was to ensure doctors understood the fundamentals before relying on advanced tools. Katie was asked to help develop these new training programs. She protested that she was not qualified. She was just a nurse, not a doctor or educator. But Dr. Porter insisted. Katie had something valuable to teach, perhaps more valuable than any alien technology. She understood the importance of staying grounded in human medicine, even while embracing advancement. Richard Stone was released from the medical bay after 5 days. He had recovered fully using only basic human medical care, oxygen support, intravenous fluids, rest, and careful monitoring. No alien technology had touched him since Katie disconnected those first machines. His body had healed itself once the conflicting technological interference was removed. He held a press conference to address what had happened. The media had been speculating wildly about his collapse and recovery. Rumors ranged from assassination attempts to unknown diseases. Richard wanted to set the record straight and, more importantly, use his platform to address a critical issue. He stood before the cameras, looking healthy and strong again. He explained what had happened in straightforward terms. He did not hide the facts or minimize the problem. He told the truth about how alien medical technology had nearly killed him. He explained how a young nurse had saved his life by trusting human observation over advanced machines. Then he made an announcement. Stone Industries would be funding a major initiative called the Human Medicine Project. This project would focus on preserving and advancing human medical knowledge, even as humanity expanded into the stars. It would ensure that doctors maintained traditional skills alongside alien techniques. It would research how to safely integrate alien technology with human biology, rather than just assuming it would work. More importantly, Richard announced that Katie Brooks would be appointed as the Director of Human Medical Standards for the project. She would work with doctors and researchers to develop protocols ensuring that human medicine remained relevant and valued. She would have the resources and authority to make real changes in how medicine was practiced throughout human space. Katie watched the press conference from a monitor in the medical bay. She felt overwhelmed by what Richard was proposing. She had never imagined having such responsibility. She was 26 years old with limited experience. How could she possibly direct something so important? But as she listened to Richard speak, she understood why he chose her. She represented something essential. She was not the most educated or experienced medical professional. She did not have advanced degrees or decades of research. What she had was perspective. She understood the value of human medicine because she had practiced it without alien assistance. She trusted human observation because she relied on it every day. She knew that simpler was sometimes better because she had seen it proven. The announcement caused immediate reaction across human space. Some medical professionals were excited about the initiative. They had felt the same concerns about over-reliance on alien technology. Others were skeptical or even hostile. They saw it as a step backward, a rejection of progress and advancement. The debate played out in medical journals, news programs, and professional conferences. But slowly, attitudes began to shift. More cases came to light where alien technology had caused problems. Nothing as severe as Richard's situation, but enough to show it was not an isolated incident. A patient on Mars had experienced neural disruption from a Valorian scanner. Someone on the Moon developed cellular abnormalities after Krell regeneration treatment. The pattern was clear once people started looking for it. The Human Medicine Project began operations within a month. Katie relocated to a research facility on Earth where she could work with. 6 months after the incident, Gateway Prime's medical bay looked different. The alien technology was still there, still available for use, but it no longer dominated the space. Human medical equipment had been brought in and given equal prominence. Old-fashioned monitoring devices sat beside Valorian scanners. Traditional diagnostic tools were stored next to Krell regeneration equipment. The message was clear. Both approaches had value. Dr. Porter walked through the redesigned facility with satisfaction. The changes had not been easy to implement. Some doctors resisted, arguing that they were abandoning progress for outdated methods. Others embraced the new protocols enthusiastically, relieved to return to medicine they truly understood. The transition had required patience, training, and constant communication. She stopped at the central monitoring station where nurses tracked patient data. The displays showed information from both human and alien sources now. Vital signs measured the traditional way appeared alongside advanced biological scans. Doctors were required to review both sets of data before making treatment decisions. If they conflicted, human observations took precedence until the discrepancy could be explained. A new patient had arrived that morning, a mining engineer from Mars with unexplained neurological symptoms. Under the old protocols, doctors would have immediately used the Valorian neural scanner to diagnose the problem. Now they started with a traditional neurological examination. They tested reflexes, checked coordination, assessed cognitive function manually. Only after completing the basic exam did they consider whether alien technology
might provide additional useful
information. The engineer's symptoms turned out to be caused by exposure to Martian dust containing unusual mineral compounds. The traditional exam revealed the pattern of nerve damage. The Valorian scanner confirmed the diagnosis but added no new information. Treatment was straightforward using human medical techniques. No alien technology was needed. Dr. Porter noted the case in her records. It was a small example but illustrated the point perfectly. Starting with human medicine meant starting with what they knew worked for human biology. Alien technology could supplement that knowledge when appropriate, but it was no longer the automatic first choice. She had been vindicated in her report and recommendations, but that vindication came with personal cost. She had to acknowledge publicly that her overconfidence had nearly killed a patient. That admission hurt her professional reputation. Some colleagues now questioned her judgment. Others respected her honesty and courage in confronting her mistakes. She had considered retiring after the incident. At 54, she had put in decades of medical service. She could step down with honor and let someone else deal with the complicated integration of human and alien medicine. But Richard Stone had convinced her to stay. He argued that her experience, including her mistakes, made her exactly the right person to lead the transition. Someone who had never made such an error might repeat it. She never would. Training programs across human space had been revised according to the guidelines from Katie's Human Medicine Project. Medical schools on Earth, Mars, and the Moon now required extensive coursework in traditional diagnosis and treatment. Students spent their first 2 years learning human medicine exclusively. Only in their 3rd year were they introduced to alien technology, and then with careful emphasis on appropriate use. The changes met resistance from some quarters. A vocal group of doctors argued that human medicine was primitive compared to what aliens had achieved. Why should humanity limit itself to inferior techniques when superior ones were available? They accused the reform movement of being regressive and anti-progress. Katie addressed these criticisms in a widely published article. She explained that recognizing human limitations was not the same as rejecting advancement. Alien technology was indeed more sophisticated in many ways, but sophistication meant nothing if the technology was applied incorrectly. A Valorian neural scanner was incredible, but it was designed for Valorian brains. Using it on humans without understanding the differences was not progress. It was dangerous ignorance disguised as advancement. She used Richard's case as the central example. 25 brilliant doctors using the most advanced technology available had failed to save him. One nurse using basic observation and simple medicine had succeeded. That was not because she was smarter or better trained. It was because she used appropriate tools for the patient in front of her. Sometimes the right tool was the simpler one. The article sparked intense debate but also won many converts. Doctors who had been skeptical began to see the wisdom in the new approach. Medical conferences devoted entire sessions to discussing how to balance human and alien medicine effectively. Research projects studied the biological differences between species and how those differences affected treatment outcomes. One significant discovery emerged from this research. Human biology had unique characteristics that made certain human medical approaches more effective than alien alternatives. The human immune system, for example, operated on principles fundamentally different from Krell biology. Using Krell regeneration techniques could actually interfere with natural human healing in some cases. Traditional human medicine worked with the immune system rather than trying to override it. Similarly, human neural architecture was distinct from Valorian brain structure. The Valorian approach to treating neurological issues assumed redundant pathways that humans lacked. Applying those techniques to human patients could cause more problems than they solved. Human neurology required human treatment methods in most situations. These findings validated what Katie had intuited in that critical moment. Alien technology was not universally superior. It was specialized for alien biology. Humans needed human medicine because they were human. That seemed obvious in retrospect, but it had taken Richard's near-death experience to force everyone to confront it. The political implications of the medical reforms extended beyond healthcare. If alien technology could be dangerously misapplied in medicine, what about other areas? Gateway Prime launched comprehensive reviews of all alien systems in use. Engineers examined power generation, life support, navigation, and communication systems. They asked hard questions about whether humans truly understood the technology they depended on. Some problems were discovered. The Valorian power system operated efficiently, but produced radiation patterns slightly harmful to human biology over long exposure. The effect was subtle and had not been noticed because no one was looking for it. Once identified, shielding was added to protect human workers. The Krell atmospheric processors maintained air quality perfectly by their standards, but those standards differed slightly from human needs. Adjustments were made to better match human respiratory requirements. These were not catastrophic failures like the medical situation, but they illustrated the broader issue. Humanity had enthusiastically adopted alien technology without fully understanding it. They had assumed that more advanced civilizations must know better in every way. That assumption was now being questioned across all fields. Richard Stone became a vocal advocate for what he called measured integration. He argued that humanity should absolutely learn from alien species and adopt their technologies. But adoption should be thoughtful and careful. Each piece of alien science should be studied to understand how it worked and whether it was appropriate for human use. Testing should be rigorous. Safety should never be assumed. He used his considerable influence to push for these standards. Stone Industries began requiring extensive compatibility testing before implementing any alien technology in its operations. Other companies followed his lead, recognizing both the safety benefits and the positive public relations. Gradually, a new approach to alien technology emerged across human civilization. Katie found herself traveling constantly, giving presentations at medical facilities throughout the solar system. She demonstrated proper observation techniques, discussed case studies, and answered questions about the new protocols. She met with hospital administrators, spoke at medical schools, and consulted with research teams. She was no longer the invisible junior nurse from Montana. She had become one of the most recognized figures in human medicine. Articles were written about her. Students studied her decisions in that critical moment. She was offered prestigious positions at major medical institutions. All of it felt surreal to someone who had just wanted to be a good nurse. But she used her platform to emphasize what really mattered. It was not about her personally. It was about the principles she represented. Trust your training. Watch your patients carefully. Question assumptions. Do not let impressive technology override basic common sense. These were simple ideas, but apparently easy to forget when surrounded by advanced alien science. She often thought about that moment when she decided to disconnect the equipment. She had been terrified of being wrong, of making Richard's condition worse, of destroying her career, but she had been more afraid of doing nothing while he died. That fear of inaction had given her courage to act. She told this to the medical students she taught. They would face similar moments in their careers. Times when they had to choose between following protocols and trusting their judgment. Times when the obvious answer contradicted. The inquiry board met in a formal chamber on Gateway Prime exactly 1 year after Richard Stone's collapse. The investigation into medical practices had been thorough and comprehensive. Every decision made that day had been examined. Every protocol had been reviewed. Every piece of alien technology had been tested for compatibility with human biology. Now the board was ready to present its findings and recommendations. Katie sat in the witness section, her hands folded nervously in her lap. She had testified before this board 3 times already, explaining her actions and reasoning. Each time had been stressful despite reassurances that she was not on trial. The board wanted to understand what happened, not punish anyone. But sitting before senior officials while they questioned your decisions was never comfortable. The board consisted of 5 members. Commander Jack Wilson from Gateway Prime, Dr. Patricia Ford, Chief Medical Officer from Earth's primary space hospital, Admiral Frank Collins from the Space Navy Medical Corps, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a researcher specializing in alien biology, and Senator Margaret Hayes representing civilian oversight. Together, they had spent 12 months investigating every aspect of the incident. Commander Wilson called the session to order. The chamber fell silent. He thanked everyone for their patience during the long investigation. He acknowledged that the process had been difficult for many involved, particularly the medical staff who had tried their best to save Richard Stone. The goal was never to assign blame, but to learn and improve. Dr. Ford presented the medical findings first. She displayed detailed analysis of what had happened to Richard at the cellular level. The 3 types of alien technology had each attempted to modify his biology in incompatible ways. The Valorian neural stabilizer tried to create redundant pathways in a brain designed for single pathways. The Krell regenerator attempted to fragment and rebuild cells that could not regenerate through fragmentation. The Xinthian metabolic enhancer worked to crystallize biochemistry that was carbon-based. Individually, each technology might have caused problems, but not necessarily fatal ones. Together, they created a cascade failure. Richard's cells received simultaneous instructions to become 3 different types of biology. The resulting confusion at the cellular level manifested as rapid system-wide breakdown. No human immune system could cope with that level of contradiction. The frightening part, Dr. Ford continued, was how easily it could happen again. Medical facilities throughout human space use the same equipment. Doctors routinely combine treatments from multiple alien sources. They assumed compatibility because no one had told them otherwise. Richard's case had been pure chance in one sense. He happened to need intensive treatment that required multiple alien technologies simultaneously. Many other patients had been treated with single systems without issue. But Dr. Ford emphasized, it was only a matter of time before someone else ended up in Richard's situation. The medical establishment had been lucky that Katie recognized the problem when she did. Without her intervention, they would have lost Richard and possibly never understood why. The equipment would have been blamed for malfunctioning rather than for succeeding at the wrong task. Admiral Collins presented findings about training and protocols. He had reviewed medical education programs across all human facilities. What he found was concerning. Doctors were being trained primarily in alien medical techniques, with limited emphasis on human traditional medicine. New graduates knew how to operate Valorian scanners but struggled with basic physical examinations. They could program Krell regenerators but had never manually checked a patient's pulse. This created dangerous gaps in medical knowledge. When alien technology failed or was inappropriate, doctors had limited alternatives. They did not trust their own observations because they had never learned to rely on them. They waited for machines to provide answers instead of using their own diagnostic skills. This over-reliance on technology had nearly killed Richard and would definitely endanger future patients. Dr. Tanaka discussed the biological research conducted during the investigation. Her team had studied how alien medical technology affected human physiology at the molecular level. They found numerous subtle incompatibilities that had gone unnoticed. Nothing immediately dangerous under normal circumstances, but concerning nonetheless. For example, prolonged exposure to Valorian neural scanners caused minor changes in human brain chemistry. The effect was small and temporary, easily missed on standard tests. But repeated exposure over years might cause cumulative damage. No one had been monitoring for this because everyone assumed Valorian technology was perfectly safe. Similarly, Krell regeneration treatments left trace elements in human tissue. Again, nothing immediately harmful, but those elements did not belong in human biology. The long-term effects were unknown. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps something serious decades later. The fact that no one had been studying these questions was itself a problem. Senator Hayes addressed the policy implications. The investigation revealed systemic failures in how humanity adopted alien technology. There was no formal testing process for safety and compatibility. No requirements for long-term studies before widespread implementation. No oversight to ensure appropriate use. Companies and institutions simply started using alien technology because it was available and impressive. This lack of regulation extended beyond medicine. Engineering, power generation, communications, and numerous other fields had embraced alien science without proper vetting. The medical crisis had been most dramatic, but similar issues likely existed elsewhere. Senator Hayes proposed comprehensive legislation requiring testing and certification before any alien technology could be used on humans or in human facilities. The board's recommendations were extensive. Medical facilities must maintain both alien and human equipment with equal priority. Treatment protocols must default to human medicine, unless alien intervention was specifically indicated. Doctors must be trained thoroughly in traditional techniques before learning alien methods. Compatibility testing must be mandatory for all alien medical devices. Regular monitoring must track long-term effects of alien technology exposure. Beyond medicine, all alien technology used in human space must undergo safety certification. Testing must prove compatibility with human biology and human needs. Long-term studies must assess potential cumulative effects. Oversight committees must ensure proper implementation and use. Then Commander Wilson addressed Katie directly. He asked her to stand. She did so reluctantly, uncomfortable with being singled out. He explained that her actions that day had saved Richard Stone's life. But more than that, she had identified a critical flaw in how humanity approached alien technology. Her courage and judgment had potentially saved countless future lives by forcing everyone to confront dangerous assumptions. However, he continued, her actions had also violated protocols and procedures. She had disconnected life-saving equipment without authorization. She had countermanded the orders of 25 senior physicians. She had taken enormous risk with a patient's life. These violations could not simply be ignored regardless of the outcome. Katie's heart sank. She had known this moment might come. Despite everything, despite being proven right, she had technically broken the rules. Medical facilities could not function if nurses randomly disobeyed doctors. Discipline might be necessary to maintain proper order even when the disobedience saved a life. But then Commander Wilson smiled. The board had debated this issue extensively, he said. On one hand, rules existed for good reasons and violations had consequences. On the other hand, rigid adherence to rules in the face of clear evidence could itself be dangerous. After much discussion, the board reached a unanimous decision. Katie Brooks would not be punished for her actions. Instead, she would be commended. More than commended. She would be appointed to a newly created position, Director of Human Medical Standards for all facilities under Unified Space Command. She would have authority to review medical protocols, recommend changes, and ensure that human medical knowledge remained valued alongside alien technology. The appointment came with significant responsibility. She would oversee the implementation of new training programs. She would evaluate the safety of alien medical equipment. She would develop guidelines for appropriate technology use. She would ensure that the mistakes made in Richard's case never happened again. It was a huge job for someone so young and relatively inexperienced. Katie stood frozen, trying to process what she was hearing. She wanted to protest that she was not qualified, that there must be more experienced people for such an important position. But before she could speak, Dr. Porter rose from her seat in the audience and began applauding. Others joined her. Soon the entire chamber was on its feet, clapping for the young nurse who had trusted her instincts when everyone else trusted their machines. Richard Stone had attended the hearing. He stood in the back, smiling broadly as he applauded. He had pushed hard for Katie's appointment. He believed she was exactly the right person for the job, not despite her youth and limited experience, but because of it. She had not been corrupted by overconfidence. She still trusted human observation and judgment. That perspective was precisely what was needed. The hearing concluded with formal adoption. 2 years after Richard Stone's collapse, Gateway Prime hosted the first interspecies medical conference. Doctors and medical researchers from 4 different civilizations gathered to discuss healthcare, biology, and the safe exchange of medical knowledge. Representatives from the Valorians, Krell, and Xinthians joined their human counterparts in a historic meeting that would have been impossible before the incident that changed everything. Katie stood backstage in the main conference hall, preparing for her keynote address. She was 30 years old now, but felt much older. The past 2 years had been intense and exhausting. Implementing the new medical standards across human space had required constant travel, endless meetings, and more political navigation than she ever expected. But the work was paying off. Medical practice had fundamentally changed for the better. She peeked through the curtain at the assembled audience. Hundreds of beings from different species sat together, all focused on the same goal: improving medical care through cooperation and understanding. It was remarkable to see such diversity united by common purpose. The Valorians with their tall frames and silvery skin, the Krell with their crystalline features and luminous eyes, the Xinthians whose bodies seemed to shift between states of matter, and of course the humans looking small and simple by comparison but no less important. Dr. Porter found Katie backstage. She had come to offer encouragement before the speech. She told Katie she looked nervous and reminded her that she had addressed much more hostile audiences than this. Everyone here wanted to learn. They wanted to understand how to share medical knowledge safely across species. Katie had become the recognized expert on that exact subject. She would do fine. Katie appreciated the support but admitted she felt like a fraud sometimes. She was not a researcher or scientist. She had not studied alien biology extensively. She was just a nurse who made one good observation at the right moment. How had that qualified her to lead interspecies medical cooperation? Dr. Porter laughed gently. That was exactly why Katie was qualified, she said. She did not approach alien medicine with assumptions about superiority or inferiority. She simply looked at it practically. What works for whom and when? That perspective was more valuable than years of specialized study. Sometimes the best expert was someone who saw things clearly without preconceptions. The conference organizer signaled it was time. Katie took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The audience applauded politely. She stood at the podium and looked out at the diverse crowd. She had given many speeches over the past 2 years, but this one felt most important. This was where she could help shape the future of interspecies medical cooperation. She began by thanking everyone for attending. She acknowledged the courage it took for the alien species to examine their medical technology critically. After learning it had harmed a human, it would have been easier to dismiss Richard's case as an isolated incident or blame human biology for being too fragile. Instead, they had engaged seriously with the problem and worked to find solutions. She told Richard's story again, though most in the audience already knew it. She did not spare details about the medical team's overconfidence or her own fear when deciding to act. She wanted everyone to understand that the problem was not bad intentions or incompetence. It was assumption. Everyone had assumed that advanced technology must be better. That assumption nearly killed someone. Then she explained what humanity had learned. Alien medical technology was indeed more advanced in many ways. The Valorians understood neurology at levels humans could barely comprehend. The Krell had mastered cellular regeneration that seemed like magic. The Xinthians could manipulate metabolism in ways human medicine could not approach. All of this knowledge was valuable and worth learning. But advanced did not mean universal. Each species had developed medicine for their own biology. The techniques that worked perfectly for one species might be inappropriate or dangerous for another. This was not a flaw in the technology. It was simply reality. Biology varied across species. Medicine had to account for that variation. The solution was not to abandon alien technology or refuse cooperation. The solution was compatibility testing and appropriate application. Before using any alien medical technique on humans, test it thoroughly. Understand how it affects human biology specifically. Identify situations where it helps and situations where it harms. Use it only when appropriate. More importantly, maintain your own medical traditions. Human doctors needed to stay proficient in human medicine even while learning alien techniques. The same applied to all species. Valorian doctors should master Valorian medicine before adopting Krell or human methods. Every species needed to preserve their own medical knowledge as a foundation. Katie clicked to the next slide, showing data from the past 2 years. Medical outcomes in human facilities had improved significantly since implementing the new protocols. Fewer complications from alien technology, better long-term patient health, higher success rates for complex treatments. The numbers proved that the new approach worked, but more interesting were the reports from alien medical facilities. The Valorians had begun applying similar principles to their use of human and Krell technology. They discovered that some techniques they had adopted from other species were indeed causing subtle problems. Adjusting their protocols led to better outcomes for Valorian patients, too. The Krell had made similar discoveries. Their enthusiastic adoption of Valorian neural techniques had been causing issues they had not recognized. When they returned to Krell native neurology, while carefully testing Valorian methods for compatibility, their patients improved. The pattern was consistent across all species represented at the conference. Katie proposed formal guidelines for interspecies medical cooperation. First, every species should maintain comprehensive knowledge of their own biology and medicine. This native expertise was the foundation everything else built upon. Second, sharing medical technology between species must include thorough compatibility testing. Good intentions were not enough. Actual safety data was required. Third, medical training should emphasize understanding over operation. It was not enough to know how to use alien equipment. Doctors needed to understand what it did and why. They needed to recognize when it was appropriate and when it was not. Fourth, multiple monitoring approaches should be used. Do not rely solely on technology from one species to assess biology from another species. Cross-reference with native medical knowledge. Finally, humility was essential. Every species should recognize that their medical knowledge, however advanced, was specialized for their own biology. What worked for them might not work for others. Being willing to question, test, and adjust was more important than assuming superiority. The audience listened attentively. When Katie finished and opened for questions, hands went up immediately. A Valorian doctor asked about specific testing protocols for neural technology. A Krell researcher wanted to discuss cellular compatibility markers. A Xinthian medical officer inquired about metabolic translation techniques. The questions were detailed and thoughtful, showing genuine engagement with the issues. Katie answered as best she could, though she often had to admit the limits of her knowledge and defer to specialists in the audience. She did not pretend to have all the answers. She was facilitating discussion and cooperation, not dictating solutions. The medical experts from each species would work out the specific details. She just provided the framework. After the Q&A session, the conference broke into smaller working groups. Each group focused on a specific area of medical cooperation: neurology, cellular regeneration, metabolism, diagnostics, surgery, emergency medicine. Doctors from different species sat together, sharing knowledge and identifying compatibility issues. It was exactly the kind of productive cooperation Katie had hoped to foster. Richard Stone approached her during the lunch break. He had been sitting in the audience watching with satisfaction. He congratulated her on the excellent presentation and the progress that had been made. 2 years ago, his near-death experience had exposed a dangerous problem. Today, that problem was becoming a solved challenge. The transformation was remarkable. He told her about new projects Stone Industries was funding. Research into universal diagnostic tools that could assess any species accurately. Training programs teaching doctors from different civilizations about interspecies medicine. Exchange programs where human doctors studied on Valorian worlds and vice versa. The goal was making interspecies medical care safe and routine. Katie appreciated his continued support. The human medicine project he funded had been crucial to implementing the new standards. Without those resources, the transition would have been much slower and harder. But she reminded him that money alone could not have achieved this. It required changing minds and attitudes. That was always the hardest part. Richard agreed, but said Katie had proven skilled at changing minds. She had convinced an entire medical establishment to question their assumptions and change their practices. That was no small accomplishment. She had become a leader not through authority or credentials, but through the power of being right and the courage to prove it. The afternoon sessions continued the productive discussions from the morning. By the end of the conference,